I was thinking this is the equivalent of parents putting like their child's drawing on the fridge.
It really is. It's like, look at all this good stuff we're doing. Look at all this minimal stuff we're doing. I never know how to start these. Do you?
It's the hardest. No, it's the hardest thing ever. Every time on Twitter, everyone's like, what's your intro phrase? And what's your sign off phrase? Stumble around in the dark until like something works.
We kind of eventually get there. If anyone knows how to start a podcast, I would really like to know because I have no clue at all. Takes a while to get the wheels spinning.
Definitely, yeah. If any suggestions on like intro phrases that we can use, that would be great. Which is why I am quite grateful that we came up with this sustainable sin and win structure, because at least it gives us some structure in the beginning.
It's more structure than I have in my life at the moment, let me tell you. That being said, why don't we bring some structure in and start with a sustainable win or sin? So, Marie, what side are we on this week? Are we sustainable win or are we a sustainable sin?
I'm gonna go with a bit of a sin. This one, I don't think a lot of people can relate to this one. I am not a great cook. So I have like a few set meals that I like to do. And one of the quick meals that I buy during the week is a ready-made frittata from my local supermarket. It's not vegetarian, it has chorizo in it. I've almost completely cut out beef, but I still eat a pork on occasion, and that's like the one of the rare exceptions. And because it's really quick, I get it done in like 10 minutes. However, they've gotten rid of it, and now they've replaced it with a vegetarian version, and I do not like it.
That's the universe trying to tell you something, isn't it?
Because it's technically better for the environment, and they even have a vegan version, and I'm like really sad. I'm like, I miss the chorizo.
I feel like there's not much else to it if there's no chorizo in it because it will already have vegetables in it. That's really disappointing.
Yeah, it's just egg and potatoes, and yeah, there's not much flavor to it, but I'm like, oh,
That sounds so bland.
it
That
is.
would make me really upset if that's what I would like come home to for dinner.
And that's my sin, because I miss the non-vegetarian version.
It's like your mind's going, yes, but your heart's just, it's not in it. And as always, mine is also food related. Surprise, surprise. This is another sustainable sin. And this one's quite ironic because the reason for this sustainable sin is because I was actually recording a reel for our Instagram channel. And the reel was around reusable cups because last episode we were talking about cups and going out for coffee. So I thought, yeah, I'm gonna record a really cool, cute little vlog video of me going to a Starbucks or a coffee shop with my reusable cup, etc. Guess what happened? I turned up. I don't have my reusable cup, which was like the whole thing of last episode, and I forgot it. I didn't actually then go and get coffee because I was so mortified. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. But I love that I just forgot the main subject of the whole video. That's kind of my sustainable sin. If anyone has any tips for remembering to bring their reusable cup, let me know because it's the one thing I always forget to bring. There we go, lesson learned.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Two Girls, One Reusable Cup, your sustainable support group, where we navigate the anguish and amazement of living a low-waste lifestyle. I'm Marie, and as always, I am joined by the lovely Beth.
Hello.
And today's discussion might get a little bit heated because it's once again a fashion-related topic. Today, we're asking ourselves, what happens to our clothes when we no longer want them?
Ooh, that is a really, really good topic. And I think everyone goes through this because naturally, like, we need different clothes for different events. Our bodies change, so we need different clothes. Clothes eventually become unwanted. And I think there's lots of myths around what is the best thing to do with them. Nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I do struggle with this one quite a lot. Currently in my wardrobe, there's a bunch of clothes that are just past the point that I can fix them, and it's just taking up space, but I don't want to. I have like paralysis because I'm kind of stuck at the moment what to do with them.
I was going to say, you've almost ruined it for yourself knowing all this information.
that's just my life, isn't it? I love researching, and then I go down the rabbit hole and I'm like, ah, shit, can't do that anymore.
It's a great job and it's really interesting, but it does put a dampener on everything, doesn't it?
It does. It does. When you donate clothes to a charity shop, what do you think happens to them?
Consumer level, I think that they go to the charity shop, they find a new home, or they just get put into storage, and then when the next season comes out, they come out again. I did actually used to volunteer at a charity shop, and I know in the little town that I was in, the clothes would kind of get passed between a few of the different branches and circulate a bit. But otherwise, I don't really know, to be honest. I think everyone just thinks every piece of clothing will then get bought, the money goes to charity, which is brilliant. But the stuff I've seen in a charity shop, I'm like, no one is going to wear a YOLO t-shirt ever again. Put that in the bin. No one's going to wear a bright neon skirt anymore. No one's going to buy that. So what happens to these pieces of clothing?
You're completely right, and you hit the nail on the head. So approximately 85% of unwanted textiles in North America end up in landfill, which is the amount of over 11 billion kilograms a year. Now, this is a rough estimate because, as I always remind people, when it comes to facts and figures of the fashion industry, they're roughly guesstimates because no one actually keeps track. No one keeps track of how many clothes people buy, and no one keeps track of how many people throw away clothes. So it is really difficult, and it always gets me so annoyed when trying to research these topics. Essentially, clothing waste is a huge problem.
You've mentioned this before, actually, in a previous episode, and I don't actually know how anyone would know how many clothes we own or would throw away because there's so many of them. You're completely right. I was actually going to say, so you're telling me that they don't go to the wardrobe in the sky, they go to landfill?
Unfortunately, yeah. In a report by the United Nations Environment Program, they wrote that every second the equivalent of one garbage truck of textiles is landfilled or burned.
It's burnt?
What do you think happens to our trash? It gets burnt.
I thought it just degraded over time and got really smelly. And then I was like, hang on a minute, where's all this space coming from? That makes a lot of sense. I feel very, very stupid now.
Anyway, and in this report, they wrote, if nothing changes, by 2050, the fashion industry will use up a quarter of the world's carbon budget.
No. See, I don't think many people think fashion is that much of a contributor. That's incredible. And that's something we all contribute to as well.
It is, because there's so much that fashion covers, and it's always the silent threat in the background. No matter how much we warn people, people just don't believe us. It's really frustrating. Textiles are also estimated to account for approximately 9% of annual microplastic losses to the ocean.
I think this is kind of these conversations are starting to happen now, where people are talking about the fact that clothing has plastic in. And I think a few years ago, that wouldn't even cross your mind. But now plastic is in most clothing. It's in most things. Plastic's in clothing is in us now, which is really scary. I think something that's really made this clear is the little washing machine balls that they sell and all that kind of stuff makes it a lot more clear that actually plastic comes off clothing in your washing machine and goes into the ocean and everywhere else, which is crazy when you think about it. You think fabric is a fabric. It's nothing close to, when I think of plastic, I think of single-use plastic. I think of a water bottle. That's quite scary, actually.
I thought this report by the United Nations Environment Program was quite interesting to read. However, it was as I was reading through it, one of those cases where it was clearly written by someone who hasn't worked in the fashion industry or hasn't directly dealt with these issues. They were just seeing a problem and reporting on them, because within the report under positives, and I quote, they wrote, H&M has also introduced a successful recycling program.
Oh, our old friend H&M. because we go on a lot about H&M and Shein and all our favorites. We don't want to be negative towards anyone that shops at these retailers. They do a very good job at advertising and making you want to buy the products, but we want to give you information about them where you can take it and use it how you will, because unfortunately H&M do things like greenwashing. They aren't the most sustainable place to shop, which is why we do these episodes and they come up quite a lot. So take that how you will. Yes, H&M's a really interesting one. I have seen their little boxes at the till. I don't know if you've seen them, Marie, and it says like you can bring clothes from any brand, put them in the box, and then I think you get some sort of incentive or discount on their clothing. So it's kind of going, hey, like devalue clothes, but also go buy some more clothes while you get rid of your clothes. It's just creating this loop. It's, boils your blood, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So you're right, those fancy little recycling bins, H&M has now introduced them in 4,200 stores worldwide. But how effective are they? And as Beth pointed out, you give clothes and then you get money back to spend more money in H&M. I found some facts that, honestly, I mean, I just can't wait to see Beth's face when I read these out to her. In H&M's sustainability report that they released...
Hang on a minute. My face is already dropping because H&M did a sustainability report. What? They've got nothing to say. Go on, sorry.
In H&M's sustainability report that they released in 2018, it states that all the materials used to make its estimated 500 million garments a year, only 0.7 is made out of recycled material.
I'm not even surprised. I'm really not. Because I think you've just said it, 500 million garments a year. Of course, it's going to be a low amount of recycled materials just purely because of the amount of clothes they produce. And that's the main problem.
However, the company has stated in the report that their goal is to use 100% recycled or sustainable source material by 2030.
Good for them. Bullshit. Good for them.
As I said, this report was from 2018. So I thought, you know what? I'll give them the benefit of doubt. I'll see if I find an updated report. So I found one from 2021.
I love this, Marie. So sneaky. These are like collecting receipts. I love it. Go on.
This is not hard to find. This was on their website.
Well, they have to. They have to put this on their website now. Advertising regulators are cracking down, especially on brands like H&M.
They can still kind of sort of hide it. And I screenshotted it so you can actually see. But then on their website, like when you go into their like sustainability report section, they proudly stated in their 2021 report that they tripled their share of recycled material that they used in garments from 5.8% to 17.9%. And this is the first thing you see when they get on their website. They are so proud of this.
Bless them. Good for them.
Exactly. I was thinking this is the equivalent of parents putting like their child's drawing on the fridge.
It really is. It's like, look at all this good stuff we're doing. Look at all this minimal stuff we're doing. Oh, now I can just like imagine like a little H&M logo putting this on their fridge and looking really proud of themselves. That makes me feel really sad.
Because like right next to this like very proud 17.9% recycled material, they also wrote that they made 199 billion net sales in Swedish krona.
That's like the energy companies recently going, look at all this profit we made while we're all freezing. This is the thing. So as obviously we know too much. We know a lot about this kind of thing. And this is why we're doing this podcast, so we can share this knowledge. But as just a normal consumer, I would look at that and go, brilliant. Like, I don't know this in the main, like, I don't know the larger scale of this problem. I just see recycled materials. There's a decent number there. Cool. I feel better about shopping here. And fair play, if you don't know the large scale of the problem, you wouldn't know how much of like a bullshit claim that is. This is the problem, is greenwashing is done by marketing experts. they know how to trick and scam you, and they do it really well. So I don't blame you as a consumer if you don't understand the reality of this. It's awful. They are just misleading us all.
I don't know if I actually told you this, but when I started therapy a few years back, I was doing like the get to know you call with my therapist. And she asked me, "Oh, what do you do?" And I went, "Oh, I'm a sustainable fashion designer." And without missing a beat, she said, "Oh, like H&M. I shit you not." And I'm paying you a lot of money here. It was the first time where I generally had to stop and go, I'm not going to give a lecture about sustainable fashion because I am paying this person to listen to my problems, not she's not paying me to hear a lecture about sustainability. But that just shows how like deep the greenwashing goes. I will never forget that.
I love that. You've paid her to resolve your problems and she just gives you more trauma. Like, but this is the thing, and I don't want to be negative towards people who have been misled because they're good at misleading. So don't beat yourself up if you don't know this. Again, whether this is what we're here for, do your research and start talking about this with people. I think a few episodes ago I mentioned how I went in a coffee shop, and all my life revolves around coffee shops apparently. Me and the barista got talking to this woman who was going on about her outfit from Shein, and she loved it and how cheap everything was, and we kind of stepped in like a thoughtful way and said, "Oh, well, there's a reason that it is so cheap." And she was like, "Oh, well, they're doing lots of stuff recently to be more sustainable." And I was like, what what gave you that idea? And it is just their marketing and their website making these minimal things they're doing into these big marketing campaigns. So it's horrible. It is profiting off the planet. It's disgusting, frankly. But anyway, I digress.
Unless they change their output and their entire operational structure, they can never call themselves sustainable.
Absolutely. And that goes for all fast fashion brands because they all share the same kind of business model of produce a ton of clothing. Yeah. Going back kind of to the theme of the episode, obviously H&M are lying, but they're also saying that they recycle a lot of clothes. So what's the problem with recycling clothing? Because surely that's better than it going to landfill, which, as we said, is obviously not great.
So yeah, I found it actually very interesting looking into this because it all sounded very, very similar. And the reason why clothing recycling does not work is the exact same reason why plastic recycling has completely broken down. And that is that it's not profitable and the fabric degrades the more you recycle it.
I think it's a common theme on these episodes is recycling just isn't it. It's not the solution, is it? And I feel like a lot of brands and companies go towards it as a quick fix.
So the author and environmentalist Elizabeth Klein says that less than 1% of clothing is recycled and made into new clothes. So especially when recycling natural fiber, for example, cotton and wool, the fiber diminishes in quality. This is also why when you buy something in a store, say H&M, and you look at the clothing tag, the most it will say that's made out of recycled material is 30%. Because you always have to mix it with virgin fabric to actually have structure to not make it completely disintegrate.
You said the same thing as well before about plastic water bottles. The same thing happens with that because the plastic has to be sturdy because it's holding water, and it's just not sturdy enough when it's just pure recycled material. But you're completely right. I've never seen 100% recycled material.
You just pointed out, we talked about our recycling episode. There's like the common misconception that like a plastic water bottle gets recycled into another plastic water bottle. That is not the case. And that is the exact same case when it comes to fiber recycling. Your t-shirt will not get recycled into another t-shirt. It will get recycled into insulation or padding or painting clothes. H&M did also run this ad campaign once where it was just like, give us your t-shirt and it will become a new t-shirt. And no, that's not how it works.
I actually saw a really cool campaign from IKEA the other day. They've just released loads of marine soft toys that are made with ocean plastic. I don't know how like sustainable that is, but the campaign they did around it was the marine, the little like dolphin soft toy was talking about its two parents being a straw and a cup, and the animal being like a party animal. But I quite liked that because it really kind of pushed the message of, like you said, a water bottle doesn't get made into a water bottle, it gets made into something completely different. So I thought that was quite nice. They highlighted that. Made me slightly uncomfortable because obviously a lot of marine life washes up with loads of plastic straws and cups in their stomachs. So I was a bit like, maybe a bit controversial, but I think that was a good way of saying to people it's not as simple as water bottle equals water bottle.
Put this into like the fashion context. I found this cool company in Pakistan, Artistic Fabric Mills, who was one of the first companies in Pakistan to repurpose old cotton into new denim. And they said it takes 3 pairs of jeans to make 1 pair of recycled pants.
Is maybe I'm thinking about this the wrong way, but is that not a good thing because we're using more of the masses of clothes we have to make one thing? Or does that mean that we're then making more things?
Kind of yes and no. So one thing they also said that the jeans that they recycle all have to be made completely, almost 98% cotton. They can't have any elastane or spandex in them. And that's another factor that requires it. And then the second one is, as I said, so recycled fiber, because what they do is they take apart all the jeans and then they put it through like a bunch of like shredders, and then and the shredders kind of compact it down, and then it's like a very long process. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this. It gets spun into yarn. However, the recycled fibers have to be spun with virgin material, otherwise they completely fall apart. So when the company first opened in 2015, it could only incorporate 5% of recycled material into the blend, and now it's gotten up to that 30%, but they still have like a long way to go. And because it's not 3 jeans make 1 new jeans, it's part of 3 jeans make up 1 new jeans with more virgin material.
That must be a massive problem though, because think of like what you're wearing now, there must be several different materials in that. And we don't like when we recycle something, you know how you like take the packaging apart so you can split it into like cardboard, the little plastic film, etc. We can't just like take the zipper off our old jumper or like take all the things apart. That must be so difficult. No wonder hardly anything is then made into something new.
Oh yeah, because everything's a blend, everything is a mix. So yeah, so unfortunately, clothing recycling has still a long way to go. And this is where the true injustice occurs, because if you cannot recycle it, what are you going to do with it? And unfortunately, it's once again, the out of sight, out of mind principle, where most of our clothing end up in the global south.
You did a really good blog on this.
So let's talk about that. So let's talk about counter-manta market. Now, counter-manta market is a topic that I am very passionate about, because I want to remind people I studied fashion and I only found out about this topic after graduating 2 years ago. And it was once again one of those eye-opening things where I was just like, seriously, I studied this for 4 years and no one has mentioned this to me.
I bet that was heartbreaking though. It's like you've been lied to for 4 years and then you go into the real world and go, oh
Yeah.
no.
Welcome to the fashion industry. I was introduced to this topic by Slow Factory, which are an amazing online education platform. They host lectures every Friday around the themes of sustainability for free. And this one was hosted by Liz Ricketts, one of the founders of the OR Foundation, which are based in Accra, Ghana. And the OR Foundation slogan is "Too much clothing, not enough justice."
I love that. That's a great statement.
Mm-hmm.
So, Marie, for people who don't know, what is Cantamanto Market and where is it?
So Kantamanto Market is located in Accra. Accra is the capital of Ghana. It is the world's biggest secondhand clothing market. So about 15 million garments end up there every week, and about 30,000 people work there, selling, upcycling, and sewing all of our unwanted clothes. The story behind this is actually like quite incredible. So clothing arrives at Cantamanto in these massive bales. Now, these clothes have started off as donations. You said at the beginning, when you worked in the charity shop, you had seen clothes being shuffled from shop to shop, and now you weren't exactly sure what happened to them after that. So basically, what happens when charity shops, thrift stores cannot sell their stock, they get bought up by a third party. Then it gets all shipped into Pakistan. Pakistan is actually the largest importer of secondhand clothing. It is why Artistic Fabric Mills is located in Pakistan, because they also deal with a lot of secondhand clothes. Then those clothes get sorted, then get distributed throughout Pakistan. Either they get recycled or they go to other secondhand clothing outlets. Because there's so much clothes, the leftover clothes get sorted and put into these bales.
So, I'm actually looking at a picture of this now, and just to give people listening a bit of context, if you've seen in recycling centres these huge, what looks like hay bales filled with plastic, it looks like that, and they're just stacked sky high, and it just really puts into perspective how many clothes are there and how many clothes that we end up giving away to get to this point. Because the reality is the charity shops can't even, and a lot of things won't sell just because of the nature of them, but we give so much to them that they can't cope. Unfortunately, a lot of things do end up here. It's the exact same thing as our plastic waste problem.
Really interesting when I was researching this and the similarities between this and our recycling episode, because I could have just changed the word plastic to fashion in the Word document and it would have made sense. Let's talk about these like massive bales, as Beth said. So these bales are huge. They weigh between 55 to 90 kilograms. And these bales are brought into Cantamanto Market. Then they are sold off to the sellers for between $75 to $300 each, depending on where they're from. I found this actually really interesting. So bales from the United Kingdom tend to be more expensive because they are of better quality, whereas bales from America cost less because they tend to be lower quality.
That's really interesting.
Unfortunately, the prices of these bales have been increasing every month, but the quality of clothes have just declined. I mean, and these bales are just filled with fast fashion and stuff that wasn't made well to begin with.
And this would have just been accelerated with brands like Shein kind of really becoming prominent after the pandemic. I mean, I've said to you before, I remember, I think I was in first year of unis when I really started seeing like places like Boohoo start to take off. But ever since these online fast fashion brands have entered the scene, I think that's where the quality of clothing has really declined.
These bales, sometimes they don't contain just clothes. The clothes can be also contaminated. They could get wet, and that means the clothes start to mold. Sometimes they stink of cigarette smokes. Sometimes they contain things that aren't even clothes, such as old crisp packets or spoiled food. The bales are meant to be sorted before they get to Cantamanto Market, but because it's just so much, stuff like this gets overlooked. Once the bales are bought by the vendor, it cannot be returned. Like, these bales are a leap of faith, and as you can see by the photo, you cannot actually like see inside them and judge the quality of the fabric. One seller, she wrote that she has to pray every single time before she buys one of these bales because you don't know the contents. It could be very good quality material or it could be horrible, useless crap that you cannot resell.
It's absolutely a lucky dip. It really, really is. And like you said, even if the clothing quality is good, people might not have looked after it. There might be like random crisp packets and funny smells going on. It's like I said to you before with the recycling, people don't care. It's out of sight, out of mind. Whereas recycling, it's so important you wash things out. It's like if someone gave you a plate of food, you ate the food, you wouldn't give the plate back dirty. You'd wash it for them and then give it them back. Whereas I think because fashion's almost been devalued, people don't care. They chuck it in the bin like it is a piece of rubbish. And it shouldn't have got to this point. Fashion, clothing is not a piece of rubbish. It shouldn't be disposed like a piece of rubbish. It is something we should be valuing more.
Yeah, and definitely. And then I think there's also this error of privilege behind donation mentality, because people think, oh, they're just lucky to have it. And it's just like, no, donate something you would like to buy in the charity shop. Donate something how you would like to find it in a store. Don't think some person will like your stained t-shirt because they need a t-shirt. No, that's just an incredibly privileged thinking.
That's so gross as well.
It's awful. And this is where this problem comes from, where it's just like, oh, someone will want this. No one will want this. Not in the state that you've left it in.
We really preach this at the slow fashion charity I volunteer at called We Wear the Trousers, who run swapping events. And the first thing we say when we give our little speech at the start is swap onto others what you would want to swap onto yourself. Because it's so true. It is treat others how you would treat yourself. But again, people treat clothing like it is just rubbish. Can you imagine though, seeing like something you used to own in one of these hay bales? It's like the whole toothbrush thing, like every toothbrush you've ever owned is still somewhere out there in the world. Like that freaks me out.
Retailers need to recoup 70 to 90% from their first selection, because as I said, these bales are actually quite expensive. It's so like interesting because it's like fast fashion within fast fashion, because they have to do this within 24 to 36 hours to get all of their money back from buying these bales. Most sellers, now this is I converted it into dollars. Sellers sell good quality items for $1.60 and rip damaged clothes for 60 cents.
It's crazy at this level. They're doing this as well.
The average retailer in Kantamanto market makes about $10 a week in profit, and only about 20% of Kantamanto's retailers make a profit. Most retailers need to take out a loan with a 35% interest rate just to pay for these bales.
It's just a massive problem, and this is not helping at all.
It's not. And you see these stalls and they're just like covered in clothing. And it's like, it's amazing how people can find anything within them. Like these streets, it's just a labyrinth of clothes. I don't want to use the word fascinating because that makes it almost a positive thing, but it's just so visually striking just seeing these vendors with all of their clothes hung about them. And it's just like the sea of color and fabric. And it's just very overwhelming.
You're completely right with describing it as a sea. I'm just looking at the pictures now. You might not have ever come across these pictures, but it looks like an ocean. For looking at it from far away, it looks like landfill, it looks like plastic, and then like zooming in on it, it's loads of clothes, and they are just chucked there in such a bad condition. People are standing on these mountains of clothes digging through them.
So the photos that you're referring to is actually the ones I put up of the landfills near Kantamanto Market. Clothes that do not get sold end up in landfill, like even they cannot deal with them. And these landfills are a massive problem because there are breeding ground for mosquitoes, which spread malaria. The water runoffs from the clothes can also spread cholera, and clothes themselves are a safety hazard. As you pointed out, people are trying to stand and walk on them, and clothes get, like, especially when they're wet, they get soggy, they get tangled up into places, they trip people up. It's just really difficult because they're just a sponge. 1/3 of clothes that enter Kantamanto Market leaves as waste and end up in a landfill or on the beach.
And this kind of answers the question to the episode, this is where most likely where your clothing will end up. It will end up in landfill, just like most plastic.
the story of, well, of the global north leaving the scraps to the global south to deal with. As we said, it's the out of mind, out of sight principle. But what I found fascinating about this is just the innovation that comes from it, because it is also this like microcosm of circular economy born out of necessity. Every 4 months, millions of garments, most of them fast fashion, get recirculated and given a new life. Kantomanto has birthed so much innovation and creativity. Some of these designers are extremely talented in trying to upcycle these unwanted clothes and come up with incredible solutions to deal with this problem. But as I always reiterate, it shouldn't be all on them. Like, this is not a good thing.
They are not part of the problem, yet they're there dealing with someone else's mess because they have to. It's incredibly inspiring how they've had to innovate, but it's because they have had to do that.
Exactly. And then there's also this other side of the debate, like the designs and styles they come up with are beautiful, but it's not part of them. It's not part of their culture because they're living through donated clothes. It's like our styles being pushed onto them. And because it's so much,
they're drowning. They are drowning in all the clothes.
There are quite a lot of groups that are trying to like solve this problem. And I mentioned the Or Foundation, which set up a lab in Ghana where they're trying to find solutions to deal with this massive influx of clothing. They teach retailers on ways to recycle clothes, such as shredding them to sell as insulation or stuffing. But shredding is a last resort because it doesn't turn a huge profit. They also teach sewing so retailers can fix all the damaged clothes. This space that they built there is incredible and it's really cool. And all I can think of is like, but imagine what we could do if we bring all these ideas and innovations closer to home, closer to us.
I think this is how we should be thinking about this, because obviously it's all quite negative. There is a very big problem here. That is the reality of this situation. But as I can imagine, people listening to this might feel overwhelmed by this. What can I do about this? This is a massive problem that has already been happening. We've said in a previous episode, turn anxiety into action. Learn to sew, learn to reuse your clothes in other ways. Don't resort to throwing them away or, as a last resort, donating them.
One of the always the advice that I give is the best way to learn about the fashion industry is learning to sew, because once you've made a garment from beginning to end and learn how much work goes into it, it just gives you a whole new perspective and a whole new appreciation. Imagine if the charity shops here come with a local seamstress. That sizing wouldn't even be an issue. You find something that you like and it's a little big, well, a seamstress can quickly tailor that for you for a price. Pay your seamstresses. It's just one extra step. That seamstress could give lessons in upcycling, pick a donated item of clothing and upcycle it. I know there's even one in Berlin that my brother went to that had a similar model to them, where they upcycle clothing and then use the shredded clothes as stuffing for pillows. But it just needs to be more of this needs to happen. But once again, I've overused this quote, but it is my favorite one. And it's the one that I always think about. I always reference when it comes to plastic pollution, the last thing we need to do is clean the oceans. And that perspective can be reshaped and be so relevant when it comes to fashion, because we can recycle and upcycle all we want. But unless we stop this flood, it is absolutely pointless.
Absolutely. And I think if you take anything away from this episode, the biggest thing I would say to do is try and change your mindset and value clothing more. Like Marie said, with learning to sew or getting clothes altered, make a piece of clothing your own, give it sentimental value, treasure it like an object that is sentimental to you, rather than treating it like a piece of rubbish. That's not what clothing was ever meant to be. And I think if you can change that mindset and talk to others about valuing clothes more, it will stop us having this disposable mindset with clothing. And also, I need to sew because, as Marie's probably said before, I'm not very good at it. And B, I break sewing machines. So don't do what I do.
I left Beth alone with my sewing machine for 10 minutes and she broke it.
I am part of the problem. That's my ultimate sustainable sin is I broke your sewing machine and I can't sew.
The best part, I don't think I even told you about this. The best part is when I went to get the sewing machine fixed, I dropped it off at this little local shop in Dublin, and I dropped it off for like an hour for an assessment, and I come back to check like what's the verdict, and this old like man comes out of the back like a surgeon, you know, from like Grey's Anatomy emerging from the doors, and he like looks at me and shakes his head and goes, "That sewing machine has been through some stuff."
I love that because it's like he was blaming you, and it's like, no, it wasn't me.
That's exactly what I said. I was like, I did not touch it. Trust me. But it's just the way he said it, and like in a very strong Irish accent, just like that sewing machine has been through some stuff.
Oh, so Marie, obviously, as consumers, we can do things like repair our clothes, rewear our clothes, and just change our general mindset to value our clothes more. But is there anything that on a larger scale companies are doing or that needs to happen? Because we obviously, unless we are the manufacturers, we can't stop the manufacturing of these clothes.
This is where something that I'm always going to also reference comes in, and that is EPRs, extended producer responsibilities. The thing, as always, laws and legislations need to be put in place to stop this massive influx of clothing. Now, I actually didn't know this, but so far, France and Sweden actually already have introduced EPR laws for the textile industry. But this is only just a drop in the ocean. We need to make companies responsible for their entire life cycle of the garment. We need to force companies to invest in recycling programs and actually follow through on them, just don't greenwash, essentially. EPRs are outlined in the EU Climate Action Plan. I can't find this plan anywhere. If someone can find the plan, please send it to me.
Please, can you find the plan?
I just keep seeing...
What is the plan? We don't know.
Yeah, I keep seeing references every time I Google EPRs. They're like, oh, and EPRs are an essential point in the EU Climate Action Plan, but I can never actually find the actual plan. Is this just in someone's head? Did someone actually write it down?
This is like the UK's net zero plan that they got taken to court for because it actually didn't really make sense or even really exist. Fun times.
I'm going to give Ursula the benefit of the doubt because I actually do like her that this plan exists. They're just really bad at sharing it. But once again, EPRs within the fashion industry is something that's not talked about. So which is why it's always important when you vote for representatives, something like EPRs are on the docket, because as a whole theme of this episode, the fashion industry is a massive problem, but not much is happening in this area.
Which is why we should never underestimate the power we have as individuals and collective individuals, the power to vote these people in and the power to decide what we invest in and what we buy. It's the basic model of demand and supply. If the demand is lower, then the supply isn't needed. If more people are buying less clothes, surely that will hopefully mean there will be less clothes. Remember, you have the power to do that.
Remember, vote on the ballot, vote with your wallet. That is like the essential thing. And also, like, yeah, the biggest thing you can do is just stop shopping. Buy secondhand if you need something. And of course, remember, the most sustainable item of clothing is the one that's already in your wardrobe.
And I think that is a really lovely place to leave the episode. And it's one of our iconic statements, I think.
Although we did not come up with that, we cannot claim it.
Oh, no credit, no credit.
I don't know who came up with that. I saw it on Instagram and now I'm saying it.
So thank you everyone for joining us for this episode. And thank you, Marie, for sharing your expertise. Marie is honestly such an expert in this field, so it's been so interesting hearing all about the fashion industry and the problems with the fashion industry. If you want to follow Marie to learn more about EPRs and the fashion industry, you can follow her on Instagram at Life on Mars. I also post some cool, fun stuff and sustainable shenanigans over on my Instagram, which is Sustainable. And of course, please follow us on our podcast socials at Two Girls One Reusable Cup. We have Instagram and Twitter.
Have a good week, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Bye.